Mafia capo mocked me at the dinner table, and the Don ruined his life the next morning. New live-in nanny, I was forced to eat dinner surrounded by Chicago's most dangerous cartel members. When a thick-necked enforcer publicly humiliated my suburban accent, Don Mateo didn't say a single word, but his silence was deadly cold. By dawn, I accidentally overheard the consigliere announcing that the capo had been stripped of his entire port territory simply for making noise in the Don's house. Let us open the file on Lena, a woman whose life had become a series of quiet emergencies. She was not looking for danger. She was trying to survive overdue rent, a sick grandmother, and the kind of fear that turns every phone call into bad news. So when the Duca estate offered her a live-in nanny position, she told herself it was only a job. Care for a traumatized boy named Nico. Earn enough to keep her life from falling apart. Do not ask questions. Do not look too closely. The moment Matteo Duca saw her dancing alone at midnight, everything changed. He did not see a poor girl trying to breathe. He saw something free, and he wanted it under his control. Lena sat on her sagging mattress, staring at the eviction notice until the numbers blurred. 3 months of rent, no extension, no mercy then. Her grandmother Margot appeared on the cracked phone's screen, smiling gently as she said she had taken her last dose of medicine. Lena smiled back and lied. She told her everything would be fine. Her voice sounded calm because she had practiced that kind of calm for years. Be useful, be strong. Do not scare the people who depend on you. But after the call ended, the room felt colder. The notice still lay in her lap, and there was no one left to lie to. Trying to breathe, Lena pressed her forehead against the freezing window and opened Pippa's messages. A job had appeared, rare and almost impossible. Live-in nanny, private estate, high security, excellent pay. The recruiter spoke carefully, refusing to name the family, which should have been the first warning. But Lena was past the point where warnings mattered. Wearing her only decent dress and adjusting her crooked glasses, she studied herself in the cracked mirror. She looked tired, too young to feel this cornered. Still, she lifted her chin. If danger was the price of saving Margot, then she would walk straight into it and pretend she was not afraid. The ride took her into a wealthy part of Chicago, where every street looked polished, guarded, and untouched by ordinary struggle. When Lena stepped off the bus, a black sedan waited at the curb. No driver introduced himself. No one explained anything. She climbed in anyway. The city thinned behind her. Stone walls rose on both sides of the road, hiding houses too large to feel real. Then the car stopped before a towering iron gate marked with a burgundy crest and a black lion. Lena looked up at it, her stomach tightening. This was not an entrance. It was a warning dressed as wealth. The iron gate opened slowly, as if the estate had decided whether she was worth swallowing. A stern woman in a gray uniform led Lena through massive doors into a foyer of marble, gold light, and cold perfection. A crystal chandelier glittered above an antique blood-red Persian rug threaded with gold. Everything was beautiful in a way that made touching it feel dangerous. Lena clutched her worn purse and tried not to look as poor as she felt. The house was silent but not peaceful. It watched. It measured, understood that mistakes here would not be treated like mistakes. They left her in the parlor with a delicate cup of hibiscus tea and no saucer. Even that felt intentional. Lena held the porcelain carefully, trying to still her hands. She had faced landlords, hospital bills, empty cupboards, but this kind of quiet made her nervous in a different way. And the worn heel of her borrowed shoe gave way. The cups slipped. Red tea splashed across the antique rug, spreading fast through the wool like a wound opening. Lena froze. In 1 second, the fragile version of herself she had tried to present was gone. The house had not even met her properly, and she had already bled color into its perfection. The sharp sweetness of hibiscus rose from the damp rug. Lena dropped to her knees, pressing her cheap handkerchief against the stain, only making it worse. Her breath came too fast. Her thoughts scattered. In a desperate whisper, she said maybe the master of the house had a sense of humor. The answer came from behind her, calm and completely without warmth. I don't. Lena went still. Shame crawled up her neck. She rose slowly, knowing there was no way to hide the stain, no way to hide herself. Whatever happened next, she would have to face it standing. And against the doorframe, dressed in black, his slicked back hair as precise as a blade. His eyes moved from the ruined rug to her crooked glasses, then to the fear she failed to hide. Lena opened her mouth to explain, but the words tangled. Mateo tilted his head. "Can you?" he asked softly. He did not sound angry. That made it worse. His calm took up the whole room. Lena felt suddenly small, not because he shouted, but because he did not need to. Men like Mateo did not chase control. They stood still and let everyone else feel trapped. Lena stopped trying to invent an excuse. She told the truth, and named every mistake with blunt, embarrassed honesty. Mateo watched her as if honesty were rarer than fear. He already knew too much about her. The unpaid rent, the sick grandmother, the absent mother, the desperation that had led her here. Lena said she needed the job. He looked down at the stained rug, as if deciding whether damaged things could still be useful. She understood the message immediately. Her secrets were not private in this house. They were tools in his hand. Mateo stopped inches from her, close enough for the scent of expensive wood and smoke to surround her. 7 days, he said. Prove you are useful or leave with nothing. Lena's throat tightened, but she nodded. Pride was a luxury she could not afford. He studied her a moment longer, as though memorizing the exact shape of her fear, then looked past her. Bruno, the bodyguard, had been standing behind her without making a sound. Mateo gave one small motion of his hand. Lena had been dismissed before she had even been welcomed. Bruno glanced at her crooked glasses with faint amusement and said, "Ragazza, let us go." Lena followed him, but she looked back once. Mateo was still staring at the stained rug. His expression gave nothing away. Yet Lena felt as if he were not looking at the tea at all. He was looking at damage, at whether something ruined should be restored or discarded. Her borrowed heels clicked against the marble as Bruno led her toward the stairs. At the bottom step, he stopped. "There is a boy upstairs," he said. "Do not push him. Just stay." Then he climbed without another word. The east corridor felt colder than the rest of the house. It smelled of furniture polish, old flowers, and grief that had been shut behind doors for too long. Lena noticed a scratch in the wood at a child's height. Bruno's voice lowered. "He has not spoken since the funeral." Lena's fingers tightened around the brass knob. Inside, the room was enormous, too enormous for a little boy. Dark blue walls swallowed the light. Expensive toys sat untouched on polished shelves. It looked less like a bedroom than a place where sadness had been arranged neatly and left alone. In the center sat 6-year-old Nico Duca. His file might have said child, but his eyes looked older than they should have. He had the family's dark hair and the careful stillness of someone who had learned not to expect comfort. In his hands was a broken metal toy car. One wheel had come loose, and he held it with painful focus, as if that small piece mattered more than anything else in the room. Bruno shut the door, leaving Lena alone with him. She did not move right away. A child like this would not trust noise. He would not trust pity, so Lena chose quiet. Lena slipped off her shoes and sat on the rug, bringing herself down to Nico's level. She did not use a cheerful voice. She did not ask him to smile. Nico watched her for 3 seconds, then looked back at the toy. Lena adjusted her glasses and said softly, "That car looks like it had a very rough day." He did not answer. She did not expect him to. After a long pause, he pushed the broken toy across the rug toward her. It was not trust yet. Not even close. But it was permission. And in that house, permission felt like a miracle. The metal axle was bent but not ruined. Lena pulled a bobby pin from her hair and shaped it carefully with her teeth. Nico watched every movement without blinking. For an hour she worked slowly, refusing to rush just because the silence felt heavy. Outside, footsteps stopped near the door, then moved on. The house was listening. Maybe Mateo was too. Lena ignored it and focused on the toy. Nico's shoulders lowered by the smallest degree. His breathing changed. It was not comfort, but it was something close. Sometimes a child does not need a speech. Sometimes he only needs proof that someone will stay long enough to fix one small broken thing. At last, the toy rolled across the rug without wobbling. Lena placed it on her open palm and waited. Nico reached out, his cold fingers brushing hers for less than a second. He did not smile. He did not speak, but he took the car and remained beside her, and that was enough. Not force a goodbye. In the corridor, Matteo Duca was waiting. His face was unreadable, but his eyes were sharp. He looked at her as if he had watched more than the repair, as if he were already deciding where she might fit inside his carefully controlled world. Matteo looked like the estate had given itself a human form. Dark suit, cold signet ring, silence wrapped around him like armor. Lina tried to ease the tension with a nervous joke, but his faint smile held little warmth. "Dinner at 8, he said. "Not an invitation, an order." Lina nodded because people seemed to nod a lot in this house. As he turned away, his hand paused near Nico's door. The movement lasted only a second, but she saw it. His fingers hovered close to the wood, then curled back into a fist. Whatever he was not untouched by the boy inside. At dinner, the silence was almost physical. Matteo did not look back when he mentioned her crooked glasses, and the small comment landed exactly where he intended. The dining room was too large, the table too long, the silver too bright. Lina sat beneath the steady-gazed Don Tommaso, the 70-year-old consigliere, who barely moved except to cut his food. He watched like a man who had spent decades near violence and no longer needed to react to it. Lina kept her hands folded under the table. She had thought the job would be about caring for a child. Now she understood it was also about surviving the adults. Don Tommaso Ricci spoke with calm precision, wasting nothing, not even syllables. Around him the others ate with loud confidence. Greco, one of the enforcers, smiled at Lina, as if she had been placed at the table for his entertainment. He mocked her clothes, her cheap shoes, the desperate life that had brought her here. Lina felt the old instinct to shrink. Instead, she looked at him and answered quietly, cutting straight through his performance. The table went still. Don Tommaso's fork paused. Greco's smile twitched. For the first time that night, Lina was not the only one being measured. Matteo did not defend her. He did not have to. His silence turned toward Greco like a loaded gun. Greco lowered his eyes and swallowed whatever insult he had planned next. A small victory did not feel clean. It left adrenaline burning through her body, so fiercely she could barely touch her food. The plate in front of her remained full. Gold plates, warm bread, crystal glasses, none of it felt like luxury. Her body understood the room better than her mind did. She was not dining with a family. She was sitting inside a hierarchy where one wrong word could cost more than pride. When Matteo left the table, the others shifted almost instantly, as if the air had been released. As he passed Lina, he gave a low instruction, feed the boy at 8. That was all. Her schedule, her movement, even her rest now belonged to rules she had not seen written anywhere. By 11 that night, her room offered no comfort. The bed was soft, the air smelled expensive, and still her nerves refused to settle. She called Pippa because she needed a voice from outside the walls. Who remembered Lina before the Duca name started changing the way she breathed. Whispering into the phone, Lina told Pippa about the guards, the silent halls, the boy who did not speak, and the man who made every room colder. Pippa started typing while Lina spoke, searching the name. Then Lina said Duca, and Pippa stopped. Her voice changed completely. "Lina, listen to me. Hang up. Leave tonight." Lina tried to laugh it off, but Pippa did not laugh back. She said the family was not just rich, not just private, dangerous. Lina looked toward the locked door and lowered her voice. "I can't just leave." Pippa's answer came fast. "That is exactly what they want you to believe." The call ended too abruptly. Lina stood in the dark, staring at her reflection in the window. Outside, a sweep of security light crossed the estate grounds. The house was awake even when everyone inside pretended to sleep. She held her glasses in one hand but did not put them on. A blurred world felt easier to face. Nico slept with a repaired car close to his chest. Tuesday and Wednesday passed in a careful rhythm of meals, silence, and watchful eyes. Slowly, Lina began learning the shape of the cage. Worse, she began learning where it felt warm. By Thursday morning, a fragile routine had formed. Lina knew which guards ignored her, which maids whispered, which doors were never opened. And the kitchen betrayed her. Butter scorched in the pan, smoke curled upward, and she nearly burned her fingers on the heavy cookware. When she turned, Nico stood in the doorway with his toy car in one hand. Shame hit her harder than the mistake deserved. She wanted to be calm for him, useful, safe. Instead, she was standing in a rich man's kitchen ruining breakfast while the child she was supposed to help watched without a word. Lena forced a small smile and drew a silly face on a napkin. "The toast fought back," she whispered. Nico stared at the drawing. For a long moment, nothing happened. Then he gave the smallest shrug. It was so slight, she almost missed it. Lena set the plate down carefully, leaving space between them. She had learned that pushing him only made him disappear further into himself, and pushed the plate a little closer to her side of the table. No words, no smile, but it was a quiet invitation to stay. Lena accepted it like a gift. Afternoon light cut across Nico's room like bars. Lena opened a storybook and read in a steady, low voice. She did not perform. She simply let the words fill the room, without demanding anything from him. Nico stayed in the corner, but his eyes lifted more often. He was listening. Then Matteo appeared in the doorway, silent and sudden, and the air changed. Nico went still. Lena felt it happen before she looked up. Matteo's presence could close a room without a single command. Nico did not retreat completely this time. He kept the book in sight. That small resistance mattered. After Matteo left, Lena tried to let the day return to normal. The estate almost helped her believe it could. Bruno nodded as she passed. The maid showed her the linen closet. Don Tommaso gave a quiet, unexpected laugh when she mispronounced one of the Italian names. For a moment, the house felt less like a fortress and more like a place where people lived. But later that night, Bruno stood outside her room with a glass of water he did not need. And somewhere after that, Matteo learned she had not shown fear. Lena understood then, in this house even courage was reported. Sleep would not come. The room was too quiet, the walls too unfamiliar, the flowers too sweet. At 11:47, Lena slipped downstairs into the cold kitchen, and milk, like a child seeking comfort, and turned the dusty radio until an old melody crackled through the static. For the first time all week, no one seemed to be asking anything from her. She picked up a wooden spoon, held it like a microphone, and let herself move barefoot across the tiles. It was foolish. It was private. It was hers. For 1 minute, Lena was not a debt, not a nanny, not a watched woman. She was only alive. Then her foot hit spilled milk. She slipped hard, crashed to the floor, and sent flour exploding into the air. White dust covered her hair, her dress, her glasses, everything. For one stunned second, she sat there in complete humiliation. And she heard it. Matteo Duca laughing, not politely, not cruelly, truly laughing, low and rough, as if the sound had torn itself out of him without permission. From upstairs came another sound, Nico, laughing too. Lena blinked through the flour. The most dangerous house in Chicago had just caught her looking ridiculous. And somehow the room felt warmer than it had all week. Through her dusty lenses, Lena saw Matteo leaning in the doorway, his guard lowered, his hair slightly out of place. The sight unsettled her more than his coldness ever had. She tried to wipe her glasses and only smeared them worse. "Don't say anything," she muttered. Matteo stepped closer. "I wasn't going to." His voice held the shadow of amusement. When he lifted his hand, Lena's body froze before she could stop it. She expected punishment. That was what the house had taught her to expect. Matteo noticed. The laughter faded from his face, and for once he looked almost sorry. Matteo did not help her up. Instead, he took her glasses and wiped the flour from the lenses with his thumb. The gesture was too careful, too close. Cold air and expensive whiskey clung to him. When he returned the glasses, her vision cleared, and their eyes met in the dim kitchen. For one heartbeat, neither of them moved. Then Lena saw the blood on his sleeve. Fresh, dark, real. Matteo followed her gaze and turned away at once. At the sink, the water ran pink over his hands. The warmth vanished. Violence had entered the kitchen with him. It had only been quiet for a moment. Matteo took the wooden spoon from her as if confiscating evidence, then said coldly, "Do not play nurse." A moment later, he was gone. Upstairs, Nico's door clicked shut. Lena remained on the floor, surrounded by flour and the smell of warm milk. On one lens of her glasses, a faint smear of Matteo's blood remained. Her hands trembled as she wiped it away with her apron. The mark disappeared, but the feeling did not. That was the problem with Matteo Duca. His gentleness never arrived alone. It came with blood, secrets, and the sharp reminder that she did not know where care ended and danger began. When Lena woke, the kitchen had been cleaned as if nothing had happened. The broken cup was gone. In its place sat a new blue one with a note in Matteo's handwriting. No apology, no explanation, just the cup. Lena touched the porcelain, unsettled by how much the small gesture affected her, and did not meet her eyes. No one mentioned the flower, the blood, or the laughter. That was how kindness worked in the Duca house. It appeared silently, without asking permission, and left Lena wondering whether she had been cared for or claimed. Lena was still staring at the cup when Pippa called again. This time there was no curiosity in her voice, only panic. She had found enough to know the Duca name was tied to disappearances, trials that collapsed, witnesses who changed their minds, families that stopped talking. "You are not safe there," Pippa said. The kettle began to whistle behind Lena, sharp and unbearable. "I know," Lena whispered, but her eyes drifted toward the hallway, where Nico's small footsteps sometimes appeared, then toward the study where Matteo spent his nights. She hated herself for hesitating. Pippa heard the silence and said, "Lena, please, do not start needing them." Ending the call felt like closing the last to clean door behind her, continue as if nothing had shifted. But later, in her room, she found her glasses repaired and placed neatly on the nightstand. For 3 years, she had looked at the world through a crack. Now everything was sharp. The gift should have made her happy. Instead, it made her feel exposed. Matteo had noticed the crack, decided it bothered him, and fixed it without asking. Tenderness, control. The two stood too close together in this house. Downstairs, near the study, Greco waited with his usual smugness gone. Don Tommaso had stripped Greco of rank for disrespecting her. No shouting, no spectacle. Just one quiet decision that ruined him in front of everyone who mattered. Lena stood in the hallway, her repaired glasses suddenly feeling heavier on her face. A gift could become a debt here. Protection could become ownership. Needing air, she took Nico to the garden. He drew crooked houses on a napkin while guards moved along the perimeter. Lena watched his small hand drag the crayon over paper. He was drawing homes with no doors. The image hurt more than she expected. Nico had started watching Lena's face to decide whether the world was safe. That was why she smiled even when she felt watched. That was why she kept her voice steady. Then a branch snapped with a sound too sharp to belong to the wind. Lena saw movement beyond the hedges, a glint of metal. Her blood went cold. She lifted Nico before he could turn his head. "We're going inside," she said softly. Not fast enough to scare him, not slow enough to be careless. Behind them, the garden no longer looked manicured. It looked staged, like a trap that had finally remembered to close. Lena carried Nico into the humid greenhouse and lowered him behind a clay pot. She knelt in front of him, holding his gaze until he understood. "Stay silent. Do not move." His fingers tightened around the broken car. Lena stood and grabbed a pair of garden shears from the bench. They felt absurdly small in her hand. Outside, footsteps approached without hurry. Whoever was coming did not think she was dangerous. They were right. She was terrified. Nico was behind her, breathing too quietly, trusting her to stand between him and whatever entered. So Lena did not run. Men came closer, shadows bending against the glass. Lena gripped the shears until her fingers hurt. Her mind narrowed to one word: Nico. Then gunshots tore through the air. Glass shook. Leaves snapped. The attackers scattered back into the garden. A second later, the greenhouse door burst open and Matteo entered with Bruno, both armed. Matteo's shirt was damp with sweat, his face stripped of its usual calm. His eyes found Nico, then Lena, then the shears in her hand. Something raw passed over his face. For the first time, Lena saw him afraid. Matteo moved toward her, but Lena did not lower the shears, not caught up with the fact that the immediate danger was gone. Nico ran from behind the clay pot and crashed into Matteo's chest. Matteo caught him with one arm, jaw clenched so tightly it looked painful. His shoulder trembled once, only once. And the mask returned. "Pack your things," he said to Lena. "You leave tonight." The words hit harder than shouting. She had protected his child, and he was sending her away for seeing what's it cost to almost lose him. Lena should have obeyed. Instead, anger steadied her. No, Matteo's eyes sharpened. Bruno went still. Lena's voice shook, but she kept speaking. You do not get to throw me out because you were scared. The words landed in the greenhouse like a struck match. Matteo stepped closer, furious, but beneath the rage she saw grief. Not weakness, not softness. Something worse. A man who had built a fortress because he could not survive another funeral. A locked house is not a home, she said. Nico knows it. Then, against Matteo's chest, Nico whispered his first words since the funeral. She stayed. Those 2 words changed the room. Matteo went still, as if the sound had struck him harder than any bullet. Nico clung to his shirt, breathing in small, broken bursts. Lena's hand opened, and the shears dropped to the floor. Bruno turned his face away. Even he knew the moment was too private to watch. Matteo sank slowly to one knee with Nico in his arms, his control breaking in pieces he could not hide fast enough. Lena stood frozen, shaking from fear and from the terrible knowledge that staying had just tied her to the boy more deeply than any contract could. When Bruno led Nico away, the greenhouse felt too quiet. Matteo rose and stepped toward Lena, stopping close enough that she could see the cut near his brow and the blood darkening his sleeve. He did not apologize. He did not thank her again. Instead, he removed her glasses and cleaned them with the hem of his shirt, slow and careful, as if that small act could say what his mouth refused. When he slid them back behind her ears, Lena saw him clearly. That was the problem. The clearer he became, the harder he was to survive. He was danger with a human pulse. Matteo held her stare. You stay, he said. It was still a command, but it came rougher this time, almost broken at the edges. Lena hated that it stopped her tears. Then he left, already turning back into the man the estate needed him to be. Alone, Lena slid down the glass door and shook until her breath hurt. No one truly slept that night. She stayed beside Nico until his exhaustion finally won. Later, 2 soft knocks came at the door. Matteo stood outside, hair damp, face pale with fatigue. He did not enter. He simply looked at her as if confirming she was still there. Matteo spoke through the narrow opening of the door, his voice low enough not to wake Nico. He asked if the boy had slept. He asked if she had. He did not ask whether she was afraid. Maybe he already knew. Lena kept one hand on the door, unsure whether she wanted to close it or open it wider. When he finally walked away, his footsteps paused down the hall until her door clicked shut first. That small pause stayed with her longer than it should have. By Sunday morning, the wet earth smell of the greenhouse still clung to her memory, and the house felt different because she did. The next morning, Lena woke with Nico's voice echoing in her head. She adjusted her repaired glasses, and every detail seemed too sharp. The polished wood, the heavy curtains, the expensive lavender, the hidden cameras she had begun to notice in corners. Downstairs, Bruno waited near the door. Your grandmother, he said. We leave now. No explanation, no request. Lena grabbed her coat and followed. The estate gates opened for the armored car, and for the first time in days she crossed back into the city. But freedom did not feel like freedom when Bruno sat beside her like a shadow. The armored car carried her across Chicago's invisible borders, from guarded wealth back toward the narrow streets she knew. Lena held the ironed coat tight around her shoulders, though it was not truly cold, and kept returning to the greenhouse, to Nico's voice, to Matteo's face when fear broke through. When they reached Margot's home, Lena found expensive, medication already waiting on the kitchen table. Enough for months. Her throat closed. Someone had paid. Someone had acted before she asked. Bruno's blank expression gave nothing away. Lena hated how relieved she felt. Help from Matteo never arrived without a shadow behind it. Margot noticed everything. The black sedan outside. Bruno at the curb. The coat that did not belong to Lena. She pulled her granddaughter inside and shut the door, with more strength than her thin body should have had. The small house smelled of chamomile, old medicine and safety. Real safety. Margot touched Lena's cheek and asked if she was sleeping. Lena tried to answer, failed, and looked away. Do not confuse a quiet man with a good one, Margot said gently. Lena swallowed. She wanted to defend Matteo. That frightened her more than the warning did. To keep from crying, Lena counted pills. One by one, she lined them up while Margot watched with sad patience. The task gave her hands something to do, And that was easier than admitting she did not know whether she had been saved or trapped more tightly. When it was time to leave, Bruno gave the smallest nod toward the window, almost respectful. Back at the mansion, the air felt charged, as if the house had been waiting for her answer. Bruno did not escort her upstairs. He sent her to the study. Lena stood outside the door for a long breath before entering. Matteo waited with a bandaged arm and a face too tired to be fully guarded. The wound made him look briefly human, though power still sat around him like a second skin. Lena refused to sit. This time, he did not command her. Instead, he sat on the edge of the desk, lowering himself closer to her height. The shift was small, but deliberate. For once, he was not looking down at her. "My sister's name was Serafina," he said. Lena did not move. The room seemed to narrow around them. Whatever story came next, she knew it would not be offered twice. Serafina had been killed by the Sorrento syndicate 18 months earlier. Nico had seen it happen from the trailing car. That was why his voice had disappeared. Matteo spoke without drama, but every word carried the weight of something that had never been allowed to heal. He admitted Lena had been hired almost by accident through the agency, but now she had become part of something larger than nanny work, larger than debt, larger than one desperate contract. The gold ring on his hand caught the light as he spoke. Lena looked at it and understood. This was not a family secret. It was a war. Then Matteo offered her a way out. 12 months of rent paid. Margot's medical expenses covered. A car ready within the hour. She could leave and never see the estate again. It sounded generous enough to be cruel. Lena stared at him. "And I am supposed to trust you." Matteo's answer came without hesitation. "Me personally." His pride made the promise feel dangerous but solid. He gave her 24 hours to decide. No pressure in his voice, yet the pressure filled the room anyway. If she stayed, it would be her choice. If she left, she would still wonder who Nico became without her. Lena turned to leave, but Matteo's low thank you stopped her at the door. It was quieter than any command he had given, and somehow harder to carry. She escaped to the garden with Nico, where guards moved along the perimeter, like dark punctuation marks. Nico took her hand. The simple trust in that touch nearly broke her. Later, he drew the duca crest on a napkin, a black lion with sharp teeth and watchful eyes. Lena stared at it. "Is that your family?" she asked softly. Nico nodded once. Then he drew a tiny figure standing beneath the lion's paw. Lena slipped the napkin into her pocket before Nico could see how unsettled her. Later, in the east corridor, she heard the counselor speaking to Matteo. "She has become your weakness." Matteo's answer was low. "Then let her choose." The words should have sounded fair. Instead, they made Lena feel the walls more clearly than ever. A choice offered inside a cage is still shaped by the cage. If she left, Nico would lose the first person who had reached him. If she stayed, she might lose herself. For the first time, Lena understood that both doors led somewhere dangerous. In her room, Lena removed her glasses and let the world blur. Sharpness had become exhausting. She tried to think only in practical terms: debt, medicine, danger, Nico. But Matteo kept intruding between the facts. The blue cup, the repaired glasses, his hand hovering near Nico's door, his blood in the kitchen sink, his voice saying thank you as if the words hurt. Lena hated the pull of it. She hated that part of her no longer wanted to leave. The house had worked on her quietly, one routine at a time, until fear and belonging had begun to share the same shape. In the dark, Lena whispered her answer to herself. By morning, a note from Matteo waited beneath her door. "I have already chosen." 2, Chapter 6, Midnight. No music. It was controlled, intimate, and meant only for her. Over the next weeks, Nico began to speak more. Small questions at first, then whole sentences. His voice changed the house. Bruno's nods softened. The maids smiled when Nico asked for toast. Even Don Tommaso watched Lena with a new kind of interest. The estate did not become safe, but it became familiar. And familiarity is a dangerous thing when it starts to feel like home. The Duca household made room for her, without ever saying her place was permanent. Bruno walked slower when Nico held Lena's hand. Don Tommaso stopped testing her with silence. The maids no longer treated her as temporary. Matteo, however, kept his distance, and that distance became worse than closeness. In doorways, at the end of halls, in the reflection of dark windows. Always near enough to be felt, never near enough to be confronted. Lena told herself she was staying for Nico. Most days that was true. On the other days, she avoided asking herself why Matteo's absence could make a room feel empty. The bond between Matteo and Lena grew dangerous because neither of them named it. He watched her with the patience of a man used to owning what he waited for. She learned the rhythm of him without meaning to, where he stood, how his breathing changed, which silences meant anger and which meant restraint. On a freezing Chicago midnight, she slipped into the dark kitchen, feet against the cold wood, and warmed milk to steady her hands. She had been unable to sleep again. Too many guards, too many locked doors, too many moments when she caught herself listening for Matteo before she listened for danger. The kitchen was too quiet. Lena stood by the stove, breathing too loudly, when Matteo entered without a sound. She did not turn right away. She knew it was him before he spoke. "Are you afraid of me?" he asked. The question was soft, almost gentle, and that made it worse. Lena looked at the milk instead of his face. Would it matter? Matteo came closer. Half a step, not enough to touch her, enough to change the air. "Yes," he said. She wanted to believe him. That was the most dangerous thing in the room. "Turn off the burner," Matteo said. The click of the dial sounded louder than it should have. He extended a scarred hand, remembering blood in the sink, guns in the greenhouse, the way Nico had clung to him. Then she placed her trembling fingers in his. Matteo led her into the center of the dark kitchen, and they danced without music. No audience, no permission, just breath, warmth, and the quiet scrape of their feet against the floor. Lena knew this was not safety, but after living inside fear for so long, even a pause in danger could feel like mercy. Matteo's shirt was clean, his control perfect, but his heartbeat hammered against Lena's cheek. She wanted that heartbeat to mean vulnerability. She wanted it badly enough to ignore the warning in her own chest. His hand held her waist with careful restraint, as if he were proving he could choose gentleness. "Do not leave," he whispered. The words came rough, almost unwilling. Then he removed her glasses. The kitchen blurred at once. Lena should have stepped back. Instead, she let the world lose its edges. Without clarity, Matteo became warmth, breath, and need. That was how the trap softened. Matteo kissed her carefully, not like a man taking, but like a man convincing himself he could be safe. Lena clutched his shirt, hating how much she wanted to believe him. Every warning Pippa had given her, every locked door, every smear of blood, every command disappeared beneath the pressure of his mouth. He did not force her. That almost made it worse. He gave her just enough choice to make the surrender feel like her own. The most dangerous cages are not always locked from the outside. Some are built for moments so tender you forget to look for the key. He moved upstairs. Matteo's thumb stroked her wrist in a steady rhythm, keeping her anchored in the haze. Outside Nico's room, he paused. That small pause undid her more than any confession could have. He knew part of her still belonged to the boy's safety, and he did not step over it. By morning, the truth returned. Lena woke in Matteo's bed, his hand resting at her waist, possessive even in sleep. The room was beautiful. The sheets were soft. Nothing about it felt simple. She lay still, realizing that a cage can become most frightening when it starts to feel like a place you chose. The scar on Matteo's forearm had faded to pale pink, but nothing beneath it had healed. That morning, sunlight filled the kitchen. It smelled of burnt toast and bitter coffee, almost ordinary enough to fool her. Lena wore his oversized shirt, wrapped in the strange comfort of belonging to someone she still feared. Nico sat at the table, swinging his legs, watching the tension between them with quiet curiosity. Domestic peace can be convincing after chaos. A warm kitchen, a child's voice, a powerful man making coffee badly, all of it looked like a life. Lena wanted dangerously to believe it was one. Nico looked up from his toast. "Did you sleep here?" The cup nearly slipped from Lena's hand. Matteo answered before she could. "Yes." Calm, unashamed, final. He did not explain. He did not soften it. The words stood in the kitchen like another claim. Bruno appeared in the doorway, read the room, and stepped back. Don Tommaso passed in the corridor and gave the smallest nod. Lena felt heat rise to her face. What should have been private had become part of the estate's silent machinery. She wanted to believe this was intimacy, but in Matteo's world, even intimacy could become a political statement. Don Tommaso's nod felt like the house itself had accepted her, and Lena was too tired to question how dangerous that was. Beneath the table, Matteo traced his fingers over her hand, slow and soothing. The touch calmed her nerves even as it tightened something invisible around her. Nico talked about monsters he had drawn. Outside, armed guards moved through the manicured garden. Inside, Lena smiled when she was supposed to smile. She let Matteo's hand remain over hers. She let the morning pass as if it were ordinary. Captivity does not always announce itself. Sometimes it arrives dressed as breakfast, warmth, and a place at the table. For 90 days, Lena learned to live inside Matteo's stillness. She learned when not to ask questions. She learned how to calm Nico after nightmares. She learned that Matteo could notice the smallest change in her breathing and still hide entire worlds from her. Then the collapse came in public. Photographs appeared everywhere. Matteo stepping from a black car with another woman, his hand at her back, her smile bright for the cameras. In one image, the woman wore Matteo's white shirt, the same shirt Lena had worn in his kitchen. The message attached was brief and cruel. "Did he tell you that you were the only one?" Lena confronted him with the photos in her shaking hand. Matteo looked at them once, then back at her. No panic, no denial, no apology. That was what broke her. Not the woman, not even the shirt. It was the absence of regret in his eyes. "Say something," Lena whispered. Matteo's silence answered for him. His empire was absolute, and she had been folded into it like another possession, displayed when useful, humiliated when necessary. The fantasy cracked open completely. Lena saw the truth at last. He had not loved her into safety. He had made captivity feel beautiful. For the complete second volume, use the first link pinned in the comments below. This is a dark romance shaped by fear, desire, control, and the painful ways people learn to survive inside emotional captivity. Some parts of this story are too raw to soften without losing their meaning. For those already inside our private library, your access is active. Both volumes are now available on the My Stories platform, without interruptions. Sometimes we have to step away from the noise to understand what people hide, even from themselves. I will be waiting to continue the session on the other side. Every Mafia boss story is not only about power, money, revenge, or fear. Beneath the violence and darkness, there is often a painful human lesson about choices, consequences, loyalty, family, and the price of ambition. This story reminds us that no matter how powerful a person becomes, no one can escape the truth forever. Hundreds of people, and make others tremble at the sound of his name. But if his heart is empty, his victory is never complete. The Mafia boss in this story represents a man who built his life on control. He believed that fear was stronger than love, that silence was safer than honesty, and that power could protect him from pain. For years, he may have won every battle in the streets, in business, and among his enemies. But the most important battle was never outside him. It was inside his own heart. That is where he truly lost himself. One of the most meaningful lessons from this story is that power without morality becomes a prison. Many people dream of becoming rich, respected, or feared. They think success means having control over others. But real success is not measured by how many people obey you. It is measured by how many lives you protect, how much peace you create, and how much good remains after you are gone. The Mafia boss had money, influence, and protection, but he did not have peace. His life shows us that a person can be surrounded by luxury and still feel completely alone. Another important lesson is that loyalty is valuable, but blind loyalty can destroy lives. In the world of crime, loyalty is often treated like the highest law. People are expected to follow orders without question. Never mean giving up your conscience. A loyal person does not simply protect someone's secrets. A loyal person also has the courage to stop someone from destroying themselves. This story teaches us that loyalty without honesty is dangerous. Real loyalty should be connected to truth, respect, and moral responsibility. The story also shows the heavy cost of revenge. Revenge often feels powerful in the beginning. It gives a person the illusion that pain can be answered with pain, but revenge rarely heals anything. Instead, it creates a chain of suffering that keeps growing. One act of revenge leads to another. One betrayal leads to another. In the end, everyone loses something. The Mafia boss may have believed that revenge would restore his honor, But what it truly did was steal his humanity piece by piece. This is a powerful reminder that forgiveness is not weakness. Sometimes, forgiveness is the strongest decision a person can make because it breaks the cycle of hatred. Family is another central lesson in this kind of story. Many mafia bosses claim they do everything for family. They say they commit crimes to protect the people they love. But protection without honesty can become another form of harm. A family does not only need money or security. A family needs trust, emotional safety, and love that is not poisoned by fear. If a father, husband, brother, or son becomes powerful but loses the ability to show tenderness, then his family may live in a beautiful house, but still feel trapped inside it. This story reminds us that children and loved ones often pay the price for the choices of powerful men. The mafia boss may think his decisions only affect his enemies, but every secret, every violent act, and every betrayal leaves a shadow over the innocent people around him. That is why one of the strongest educational messages is this: before making a decision, we must ask ourselves who will suffer because of it. A selfish choice may bring temporary success, but it can create long-term pain for the people we love most. Another meaningful point is the danger of pride. Pride can make a person refuse to apologize, refuse to change, and refuse to admit they are wrong. The mafia boss may have spent years believing that saying sorry would make him look weak, but in reality, the ability to apologize is a sign of strength. It takes courage to face the damage we have caused. It takes maturity to admit that we hurt someone, and it takes true character to change before it is too late. The story also teaches that redemption is possible, but it always requires sacrifice. A person cannot simply say they have changed. They must prove it through action. Redemption means accepting responsibility, protecting the innocent, telling the truth, and sometimes losing everything that was built on lies. For a mafia boss, redemption may mean walking away from power, exposing corruption, saving someone he once endangered, or choosing love over control. The path to redemption is painful because it forces a person to confront the worst parts of themselves, but it is also the only path that can lead to peace. From a human perspective, this story is powerful because it shows that even the hardest heart can still feel pain. Behind the cold eyes of a mafia boss, there may be regret, loneliness, childhood wounds, or a deep fear of being betrayed. This does not excuse his actions, but it helps us understand that broken people often break others when they never learn how to heal. The educational value here is important. Pain should not become an excuse to hurt people. Instead, pain should become a reason to grow, to seek wisdom, and to choose a better path. For viewers, the lesson is not to admire the criminal lifestyle, but to understand its emptiness. The suits, cars, mansions, and power may look attractive from the outside, but behind them there is often fear, guilt, and loss. A life built on violence can never bring true happiness. A life built on lies can never bring true freedom. And a life built on fear can never create real love. In the end, the story of a mafia boss is really a warning. It warns us that every choice has a consequence. It warns us that money cannot buy peace. It warns us that fear cannot replace respect. It warns us that revenge cannot heal a wounded heart. Most importantly, it reminds us that the greatest power a person can have is not the power to control others, but the power to control themselves. The deepest lesson is simple but meaningful. Choose character over pride, love over control, truth over silence, and forgiveness over revenge. No matter how dark a person's past may be, change is possible when they are willing to face the truth. But the longer someone waits, the higher the price becomes. A mafia boss may win the streets, defeat his enemies, and build an empire, but if he loses his soul, he has lost everything. True strength is not found in violence. True strength is found in responsibility, compassion, humility, and the courage to become better before it is too late.